Hello, my friend. You asked me to speak to you about motherhood from an existential perspective. Well, that probably means you want me to talk about the limitations of motherhood, and you want me to talk about a realistic experience of motherhood rather than an idealized version of motherhood that you should try to fit in with. Motherhood is one of the hardest things in life because you are totally responsible to create another human being and to help it grow into the world as it is, whilst at the same time, hopefully, helping your child to want to change the world for the better and to find out in what way they can contribute something that is specific to them and that will allow them to do this, to kind of realize the promise of their life, as it were. Now, that is a huge responsibility. It's hard enough to realize the promise of your own life, but to feel responsible to help another human being or several other human beings to realize the promise on their life is obviously going to be a bit of an up and down experience. And that is pretty much how most mothers experience it. First of all, we all have illusions about motherhood. We all think our parents should have been so much better. We know exactly how they should have been. And when we become a parent, we know exactly what we should be doing to get it all right. Well, the whole point about parenthood is that you never get it all right. And as Winnicott said, to be good enough, you actually have to make some mistakes because you have to keep some of the space open for the child to criticize you and to figure out what their frustrations are and what it is they need. If everything is constantly right for them, then they'll just become passive and they'll just give in to experiencing what is on offer without discovering the need to struggle and the need to fight for your own way of life. So that idea of being good enough, I would like to change from an existential perspective into learning not to be good enough. And that, I think, is the hardest part of being a mother or a parent. Because what that means is that you have to allow yourself to realize that, you're not going to do this deliberately falling short, but you are going to discover week after week, day after day, month after month, year after year, the many varied ways in which you feel you fall short of this ideal norm in your mind, or are not good enough if you compare yourself to the neighbors or the other mothers in the school who do this, that, and the other. There is always going to be a huge, gaping, empty space in your experience as a mother where you think, oh my goodness, I could have done this, I could have done that. So this sense of existential guilt is always very much part of the motherhood experience. And with that sense of existential guilt, you will be trying to improve yourself and to do things better, only to discover that sometimes the harder you try and the more you try to be good and the more you yourself become hemmed in your motherhood, and that's intolerable, or you're hemming your child in or setting expectations that are way too high. So basically what you learn as a mother is you cannot win. If you're too good as a mother, you will be suppressing your children in some way. If you're too bad as a mother, you will be, depriving them, or in another way, you may be hurting them too much. There are so many ways in which you can be not good enough that really you don't have to try. But what you do have to learn to do is to let go of this illusion of you being a good mother and embrace the idea of you trying to be a whole mother, of doing the mothering with your whole heart and always thinking about your child or your children as well as about yourself, and often much before you can think about yourself, and to feel the love and the care and the protectiveness, and to know at the same time that this very love and this very protectiveness will also become an obstacle to the child. So, no winners in motherhood, but once you've finished with it and you get into the phase of grandparenting or maybe even beyond that, and you look back on it, you will still see that this phase of mothering, of parenting, is a phase during which you move from being someone who just wants to take from the world and who wants to be given things and who has high expectations and who is often discontent, to being someone who is just learning to be content with the survival of the child and the steady progress of the child, and with the knowledge that you're doing enough to make this happen, and that at least you're not standing in the way of their progress too much. So there's an art to this discovery of how much hard work it is to raise children, and how much you have to let go of your illusions about yourself in that process. And that, I think, really is what brings maturity, this much more realistic understanding of what a person is, how we can raise a person, what we can do for each other, how that impacts on us and how hard that is. And this whole thing about emotional closeness and intimacy, and how we can be fair to each other and how we are always unfair to each other and disappoint each other. All those ups and downs and all that, waviness of the sea of parenthood is what makes you a mature human being. So by the time you come to the end of that, the end of your 40s maybe, mid-40s, end of the 40s, 50s, you will know a lot more than you did before you launched into this. It's always like jumping in at the deep end, becoming a parent, and it's learning to swim without really any proper instruction, unless you're lucky enough to have been part of a family with lots of children where you were taught how to look after the little ones. But, as you know, that too has drawbacks, and many people who've been in that position are not keen to launch into motherhood or parenthood themselves. So, complicated. The major takeaway from that is stop culpabilizing yourself. Start accepting your guilt as a mother. You will be guilty. You will be doing it wrong, and you will be reproached, and you will sometimes be loathed and sometimes be called names, and you won't get the gratitude that you were hoping for, but you will have gotten the full benefit of this inner transformation and this second growing up that you're doing as your child grows up. You go through all the ages again, and you become much more whole in yourself, and you get a much more objective and broader view of who you are and how you want to live and what it is that matters. So it's a very good training ground for the human being, not just for the child you raise, but for you as a person too. So I say, try to have as much fun with it as you can, and stop feeling afraid of it, and stop thinking that you're making a mess of it, because that mess if you stick with it and you try to sort it, understand it, and put some structure and some kind of processing to it, that mess processed is your maturation and your evolution, and will also be the starting ground for your child to learn how to resolve that mess for themselves. I hope that helps you in your difficult task as a mother. Especially mothers of small children have one hell of a job to do. My respect.